Good afternoon. Welcome to this special call meeting of the Athens in Motion Commission. We're here to talk about the pavement maintenance program this year and opportunities for facilities through restriping and et cetera. It's our first special call meeting of the year. I'm going to pull up the agenda. So we're meeting until about 5:30. I'll have a quick update on T-SPLOST, and then we'll just hand it over to Daniel. And then our next full commission meeting, of course, is Tuesday, February 22nd. So, all right. Let's see. And Daniel, do we have any public comments?
We do not.
Okay. So I just wanted to take a moment to give a quick update on T-SPLOST 2023, which Athens in Motion submitted several projects related to our charge to build out the bike and pedestrian micromobility network in Athens. The mayor and commission, the commission did vote on a commission-defined option of the T-SPLOST 2023 list. And they organized it a little bit differently. And so the short version is that they created some corridor buckets. Lexington and Atlanta Highway are on there still. They added Prince Avenue and Jefferson River Road, and then they gave 9 million each. Of course, the downside of just choosing an amount means that it's just an amount and it may not fully build out infrastructure. But I'm confident with the federal infrastructure dollars coming down, and of course, the importance of Atlanta Highway West Broad, Lexington as State Route 78 or S78, and much of Prince Avenue and Jefferson River Road is also a state route that we will be able to build out high quality, safe, protected facilities for our most vulnerable users. So I'm feeling okay about those amounts. They reduced the big bucket for our high priority projects, and sort of it seems like they thought that they would the commission would combine in the pedestrian accessibility improvements into that. So that's down to 8 million. But that's still something to work with. And Daniel and I are still kind of parsing it out. But there's also numerous micromobility improvements besides that. So of course the neighborhood projects are still all in there, and that's really encouraging for those communities to get what they asked for, like Westchester and Stonehenge. And there's been some money added back for the West Broad community, a little bit of money for 5 Points, things like that. So very excited about what this T-SPLOST will mean as far as building transformative, safe micromobility infrastructure in Athens. So I think that we can all be really excited about that. And of course, just as a reminder, because we are an advisory board to the government, Athens in Motion cannot promote the T-SPLOST per se, but we can educate and inform. And I hope that you all will do that or help us do that. Maybe we can talk about that in an upcoming meeting, like how we want to inform people like what the T-SPLOST is and what they can expect to see on it. And when the election is, and the referendum is May 24th. So, but y'all, it's a great time. I'm so glad that with this T-SPLOST and with the federal infrastructure package that we have a bike and pedestrian plan, even as Daniel is going through and seeing how it can be updated and looking at most recent data. It's great to have a plan in place versus like who can yell the loudest, right? Yeah,
Um, just real quick, May 4th, that is also mayoral election, right? Is that on the same, is it going to be on the same ballot?
that's a great question, Aaron. Yes, the mayor's race, which I forgot was this year, and then commissioners for the odd districts are up for election, but we don't. I'm not sure what the districts are exactly or
I
what those
know.
look like.
At least with it being on with the mayoral election, you know, it's good for, I think, good for turnout. So,
That's a great point. That's a
yeah.
great point. Um,
Can I say something about this too? I think that
yes.
even though the Athens in Motion projects got reduced in terms of dollars, we're going to be really busy because so many of the projects on this T-Splost, assuming it passes, are going to involve us because there are, you know, pedestrian safety and bicycle safety elements to so many of these things. So we're going to be busy.
That's a great point, Teresa, and maybe a question for Daniel. So, the neighborhood stuff that is not in the plan, is that under our purview at all as far as review? Is it kind of like, hey, by the way, does it, but does it carry the same weight as something, say, like West Broad, which is tier one in our bike and pedestrian master plan?
I mean, that's a great question. It's the bike and pedestrian master plan, from my understanding, is every street in Athens-Clarke County. Um, the tiers, tier 1 through 3, are the top 3 rankings for all of our streets. So there are a lot of streets that didn't make it into that ranking because it's just we have, I think, 1,600 streets or something like that. And so this first round of Athens in Motion focused on those critical corridors and major arterials and collectors, because those were the roads that did score higher, um, because they are the most connective tissue, basically. That being said, I don't know what it means. It really depends on the description of that particular project, because that is the legally binding phrasing for how that money can be used. So I have it open. If you'll give me just a second. So the project number, do you know that off the top of your head?
For a neighborhood project,
For the Athens in Motion,
number
yeah, here it
90,
is.
I think. Yeah.
Well, it's number 23 now, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I just saw it right when you said that. Okay, so legally binding phrasing that was voted on last night. So this program includes funding for capital improvements on routes for the bicycle and pedestrian projects as may be contained in the approved Athens in Motion plan, as may be amended from time to time, and for improved pedestrian accessibility. Depending upon actual cost and funding availability, improvements may include but are not limited to additional roadway bicycle lanes, separated bicycle lanes, roadway pavement marking, off-road bicycle paths, trails, okay, sidewalk improvements, pedestrian safety devices such as stamped and colorized crosswalks, flashing crosswalks, removing obstructions such as utility poles and sidewalks, refuge islands in intersections, improvements for the visually impaired, improved access to ACC transit stops, signage, pedestrian countdown timers, and/or other safety equipment to the extent allowed by law. Budgeted project funds may be used as matching funds for leveraging grant opportunities. And then it goes on about some other stuff that is on every single one. So it actually looks expanded beyond projects within the right of way, because it does mention off-road bicycle paths, trails, sidewalk improvements. So trails specifically, um, in my experience, refers to greenway trails. But this, yeah, it actually it does say as may be contained in the approved Athens in Motion plan. It does not define a tier. So I believe every single project would still go through mayor and commission. And it sounds like they wanted to write it in such a way so that it made it way more flexible to use that for grants. So it's like there are some grants out there that are like a TE grant, for instance, is up to $1 million, but you have to go through all of these processes. And so it ends up costing 3 times more to do the work because you have to go through the GDOT processes, but they match 80% of that. But it can't go over $1 million. So what will usually happen? So it's like if there is something, maybe a section of Greenway, you still have to pay for it all up front out of pocket, and then they reimburse, I think is what my understanding is based on our conversation yesterday with somebody. So I'm wondering how flexible they're going to want to get with what that project is used for. Because they don't have a Greenway, like their Greenway project, it refers to the specific trail, right?
Yeah, that one's really specific. Okay, yeah, I was just wondering like how this is going to
Sorry,
fall.
yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. All right. We'll come back to that. I'm sure more information will come out. Don't need to take up our whole special called meeting with that, but I did just want to fill everyone in. I'm sure we'll have more conversations about that in the future. So yeah. And going on to the main event, pavement maintenance.
Woo! All
Yes.
right. So as I kind of talked a little bit about this on, I guess, a week or two ago, I don't know, on our last meeting. Oh my gosh. Okay, so like I literally had everything up on my screen and I just lost my data connection. So I'm closing that out and we'll have to go old school. So all right. So this is the map for calendar year 22 pavement management program. This was voted on last night by mayor and commission. I didn't look at the details, but I do believe there's some notes in there about Athens in Motion's, like looking at a few of the routes. So that's why I wasn't sure if we were going to need a voted on motion. I'll find out real quick. In the meantime, while I'm sending this message, does anybody have any questions about this year's paving?
So Daniel, this is all still being paid with 2018 funds, is that right?
Correct.
And when would the new batch of money kick in?
Well, so this is for paving this year. It's so most of our repaving gets done in the summertime. Some of this is carryover from last year, with that carry forward from CY21. That's what that means. And I believe the pink roads here are the ones that are carry forward. I wanted to talk about some of these specific roads, but yeah, so the money is available now. It's not because it's not part of the fiscal year thing, like we don't have to pay out before the end of the fiscal year. This is through T-Splost. I think we also have some other funding sources, maybe LMIG. I'm not positive on that, but there's several different sources that we use to go towards this
Mhm.
this type of work. But T-SPLOS was a major contributor, and with this 23 project list, it will continue to help us get this done.
So the thing I've always had a hard time with all this pavement maintenance and the T-Splosh funding is that we can't build we can't do the pavement maintenance at the same rate that the money comes in. So we've got the money sitting there and then we slowly use it up. So at what point do we expect that the 2018 money will be gone and then the new pot of money has to kick in?
Actually, I think we could use it as quickly as we want, but we planned it out so that rather than doing 5 years worth of repaving all in one big batch, we split that funding over 5 years. And so this is the last year for the 2018 funds. My understanding is that we use it up for each year. So think of it this way, like if we got $30 million, we could go out and we could hire some people and they could do $30 million worth of repaving like this summer, right? What that means for our life cycle down the road is that in 10 or 15 years, that $30 million worth of roads that were repaved are going to need to be repaved all at once because they're all failing at the same time. So rather than doing that, we're timing it so that we're repaving the lower, most degraded roads, which is what we would do in that case too. But because we would be doing so much at once, you could get all the way up. So PCI, Pavement Condition Index, is what we use to determine the paving schedule as well as a few other factors. With those lower scores, we could be repaving anywhere from like PCI score of 35 all the way up to 45. If we were doing $30 million worth of repaving all at once, then we would start getting to maybe 55 PCIs. But we want to make sure that what we're doing today is still going to be sustainable 10 to 15 years from now. So that's why we do space it out on a yearly basis.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. It's just, one of the questions that kept coming up in the T-Splosh discussions, both in the meetings and then outside of the meetings is, well, TPW still has all this money left over, why do they need so much money and, all this? And I understood that it was encumbered, but, I didn't realize that it was a deliberate matter of timing it out so that you didn't end up with all these things coming due for repavement at the same time in the future. So that makes more sense. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's definitely a lot more complexity to it. Ronnie could speak better to it if he were able to join us, but he was actually traveling today and he's got some vacation time to spend with his family coming up, so I didn't want to pull him away from that. I think in addition to that, we may have been holding some of that aside just in case we didn't get funding through T-SPLOS 23, but I'm not positive on that. But because I don't know the numbers of how much we were holding aside. But yeah, he hasn't responded yet. But I can, if you want to have that question answered by Ronnie, we can send that over to him.
Why don't you just put it to him, and if he says that there's more to it than what you told us, then, you have to listen, but, he doesn't need to make a big deal out of it. If you've pretty much got it right, and what you said sounds very plausible, so.
Okay. I'm glad it was convincing.
Yes, you were.
All right, so the first one I want to talk about is the section of Baxter Street. So I'm going to try and zoom in here. I would much rather have my map. Let me see if the data is loading yet. Nope. Well, that's too bad. So it basically goes from Rock Springs to Millage Avenue. I'm gonna pull it up on maps so that you can get a better view of it.
And this was paved just a few years ago, but then I know Ronnie talked about it like with all the rain and it was some uh, issues with the pavement they used, but it seemed to, boy, it just seemed to disintegrate very quickly.
Yeah, what he had talked about, and I assume that's part of why we're repaving this, is there's different levels of repaving. If you just do a top layer, but your foundation is weak, then your top layer is going to break. This specifically called for a full depth reclamation, or what's it called? Full depth reconstruction, not reclamation. That costs 3 times more than just resurfacing, but it allows you to not have to resurface as often. So to give y'all some context with this, I've got Strava Metro pulled up. I want to point out that this is mostly for the user activity. If I can pull it up, is I guess okay, I can't pull it up here, but so this is last year's traffic. This is only for people who use Strava to track their trips. Majority of those trips were leisure related. I'm not sure what it does have demographics information in it, but I'm not going to get to that level in what we talk about today. With this, you can see there's a lot of traffic on Millage for bike traffic, and South Rock Springs gets a fair amount as well. There's not as much on Baxter. It could be that that just doesn't feel as safe, or it could be that, there's a hill there and, this is an easier way, or just that the majority of people who would make this connection prefer to take another route. We can see that there are existing bike facilities in the section, but they are definitely not preferred. Very narrow bike lanes. Let's see if this will load.
Yeah, I thought that on that section from Rock Springs into Millage that it just becomes like buffer. It's not formally a bike lane past Rock Springs.
Yeah, so we can see some sharrows on the road there. That might be the case. I think I have it listed as bike lanes, and I believe I don't know that I'm looking for symbols to see if there are any.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
if there are, there shouldn't be because it's really
Right, absolutely.
not a bike lane.
But as we discussed before, they also shouldn't be sharrows. So, so yeah, this one. So maybe there is not bike lanes fully. I think some areas. I guess that yeah. Okay, so that's leading up to. But just past it, we have bike lane symbols.
Mm-hmm.
But even that one is not really recommended either. These are a little wider though. This, as you can see, 3-lane striped road. These are 9-foot travel lanes and a 10-foot thinner turn lane. The pavement width is 36 feet, and this is a 35-mile-per-hour road, but it definitely gets, I believe, faster traffic than that because the context doesn't quite fit 35 miles per hour. In the Athens Motion Plan, this is Athens Motion Project number 93. It is a tier 1 bike priority. It is not tiered in the pedestrian system because there are existing sidewalks. And in that plan, the proposed facility is a buffered facility. So the comments I have are that these are deficient bike lanes, but you pointed out that actually they're just sharrows because the width is not there for bike lanes. You know, in a perfect world, we would widen this, get the buffered bike lanes on both sides. In order to do that, that would bump this into a capital project. So we have some thoughts about what we could do here.
I had a question, Daniel. I just had a question.
Yeah.
You said 36-foot width, but then you said it was a 10-foot center lane and two 9-foot travel lanes. So that would be 28 feet.
So
Right,
then
and
probably
I
2
was not
feet
including the
buffers.
bike,
The
so that
Those are only 2
36
feet
edge of
wide. Those are only
pavement.
about 2 feet wide. I mean, that still doesn't add up to 36, but anyway.
Yeah, let's just see, that is not. So, yeah, it looks like curb to curb in this specific spot is about 35 and a half.
Okay.
So I might have been rounding up, or I might have measured in a different spot. That can be a variable width.
well, you can measure the roads.
Oh yeah.
Really?
In Google Earth, if you right click, you can go down to measure distance. And this is just on Google Maps.
Wow.
So this one is showing to the curb, 34 and a half in this spot.
Mhm. The minimum
Ultimately,
travel lane width is 10 feet, 9 feet.
yeah, and so the travel lane gets measured from the center of the yellow line, so between the two yellow lines
Right.
to the center of the white. And the resolution is not very good in this. Let me actually, I'm going to switch to this one. While that's loading, I'll just go ahead and say, ideally, we'd widen the road, add 2 one-way buffered bike lanes. This would require a capital project and additional grant funding or Athens in Motion funding. For now, what we could do is send this on to a consultant for designing striping, and find a way to maybe combine both of the deficient, or not deficient bike lanes, but just that extra space into one bike lane on one of the directions. So typically, I've been doing, it's been mentioned to me that uphill bike lanes and then downhill sharrows are a little better, but I wanted to get that opinion from you guys.
I think I'd also wonder which direction is more commonly traveled by bicycle. Is it, eastbound or westbound? Or is there no difference? I've rarely seen bikes along that stretch for the reasons we've talked about.
I mean, I'll just generally speaking, yeah, I like sometimes, like when I used to live on Baxter, I would just take the whole lane going downhill on Baxter because you're in the bike lane and then people pull out of side streets into you and you're going, fast enough and you just can't stop. So and you're going with traffic anyway, the speed of traffic. So generally speaking, I like bike lanes uphill, and you have to do, just take the main lane going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the idea here then would probably be to continue the bike lane up past, I think there's a Dollar General there, past like on the same side as Georgia Cycle Sport, because you're still kind of huffing and puffing. So on the, what is that, the south side?
Well, also keep in mind that this is just from Rock Springs, so right where Dollar Tree is.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about anything west of Rock Springs, right?
Right. So
Right,
this
that's what
would
I just
be,
mean, like on that side. So
okay.
so the lane exists up to Rock Springs, and then it would continue through this intersection here on the right side here.
Yeah, so it basically, we're repaving, I think, up to this intersection. I don't know that the intersection gets repaved. I do want to add in a bike box on Rock Springs. And I've checked and we can do that as part of it. So basically striping a bike box here, move those lines back a little bit. That'll give cyclists the ability to turn onto this, and this would be a bike lane on this side of the road going uphill all the way over to Millage, I believe. Unless we wanted to, I know that there is like a dip here, it looks like. So I don't know if you would want to just have the bike lane on this side, or if you would prefer to have the bike lane here and then switch to Sharrow on downhill and then do bike lane on the uphill on the opposite. But that's that whole kind of switching in and out of bike lanes. I know that that's pretty
Yeah.
unpopular too.
Yeah, no, that's,
But-
yeah.
I don't think that's good at all. No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
I'd say I would, when I say I'd ride down or in the full lane, it was down the big Baxter Hill where you're going at a pretty good clip. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's as good here.
Okay. It looks like you could probably pick up some good momentum down this hill to get most of the way here. So yeah, my recommendation, and all of this will be run through Banesh and Tool Design Group, but we would stripe a buffered bike lane on this side if we can get it. Now, there are a couple little caveats here, as always. According to traffic engineering, those travel lanes are too narrow for this area. So with 9-foot travel lanes, buses and fire trucks have those big mirrors, and they can actually clip the cyclists or people on the sidewalks. So they would like to get these travel lanes to 10 feet. So then we would have usually they want a 12-foot center turn lane. I think we can keep the 10-foot here probably. But let me just double check and do a measurement on that.
So 3 10-foots would still leave you 5+ feet for a protected bike lane, which seems like plenty in a one-way.
Yeah.
Right.
So it looks like, yeah, so it's about 10 feet turn lane. So with that, we would still have room for a full bike lane. It may not be able to be buffered, but we could do like a protection, like the pylons, those get driven over a lot. We're exploring some other options too for different ways of protecting it. We did recently get a new piece of equipment from our streets and drainage, where one of the issues in the past is that the street sweepers are width of the driving lane. And so if you have a protected bike lane that can fill up with leaves and our street sweeper can't get into it, I think they recently, or like in the last couple of years, they got an attachment where they can actually do that off to the side and clean up those bike lanes as well. So, so that could potentially open us up to more protected bike lanes with more permanent infrastructure. But this is also kind of a holdover. I did double check with them. So full depth reconstruction, is 3 times as much as resurfacing. If we come back later and widen, it's not so much that we're going to have to redo all of that. So I wanted to make sure that if we were spending 3 times as much and then we came back 4 or 5 years later, we're not going to just be undoing the work that we just did. They mentioned that would not be the case. What we would likely do is cut at the kind of edge of the driving lanes and then add on. So for this project, a future capital project, we need to widen the sidewalks. This sidewalk doesn't even have a buffer that it's supposed to have, I don't think. So
Right.
we actually need to require right-of-way, acquire right-of-way, move the sidewalk back, make room for bike lanes on both sides, plus a buffer strip. So this is getting into a pretty substantial capital project. This is
gonna
more
say-
just for this specific.
I mean, another way to protect bike lanes is to raise them and then to have them maybe at a slightly different, not quite as raised as the sidewalk, but more raised than the street.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
Absolutely.
as you increase the sidewalk, it could replace where the sidewalk currently is, the unbuffered sidewalk currently is, and you just have a sidewalk inside of that. It's obviously there are ways to sign it, to stripe it, to color it so that people learn that that's the bike part and that's the people part. We don't tend to think that way here in the US, but In many other countries, it's very clear color coding works as a way of signaling you're on the bike part, you're on the people part. Pedestrian.
Yeah, and I've been looking at some of the other options besides just thermo.
Mhm.
One of the things that we've been doing in leisure services, as you approach a driveway crossing, it switches from regular concrete to red dyed concrete. This is not paint. It doesn't slip or slide, and it is a signal. It's like a marker for that. I've seen there. I don't know if it's colored asphalt or colored concrete, but you can actually have colored material. So we could do green material for the bike lane area. It would cost a little more, but we're not having to deal with green thermo. There's some slipping and sliding problems. If someone does mount the curb or there's a crash, it can, it can wear over time, that kind of stuff. So that's something I think would be really cool for this area. But all of that is kind of aside the point, within the repaving schedule, that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Okay.
Daniel, just want to say that section of sidewalk you're saying wasn't, I don't know if you said it was it not wide enough, the top right section. Anyway, that up here, it's up at the top when you go up to Millage. Anyway, that section where they put up that retaining wall, they just put in that section of sidewalk less than 3 years ago, about 2.5 years ago.
Right.
So anyway, it is narrow there, but I'm just glad it's there because it wasn't even there till 2.5 years ago at that corner.
Oh yeah,
But I
up here
imagine,
at Millage. Yeah. Yeah, I know that, it gets expensive. And I think this one actually does no, it doesn't. So yeah. It's
All right.
yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move to design with this. We're thinking about potentially the bike lane coming towards Millage. That makes sense to me because also when I'm biking, which I have biked on this road recently, I get stuck behind all the cars that want to go straight, and then I just want to turn right on Millage. So that will be nice to go through that. And then especially since the bike lane continues on the other side. So I think that's a good approach. I know that the designer might come back with something different. Is there anything else you want to talk about this one, Daniel? Or is this the major one, or like how many? Because we only have about
This is
40
the major one. There's one other that is Athens in Motion themed.
Mhm.
So Westchester Drive will be our next one that we're talking about. I wanted to talk about Barrow Street because that was one that Mark brought up to us, and that's more of an intersection thing. And Old Epps Road, which these are all safety related ones. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about bike boulevards and a couple ideas I had about like leisure services stuff. So we should probably move on to the next one because this goes till 5:30. So. This is the biggest one though. The only thing, just to mention it again, bike boxes at Rock Springs. Go back, put them in there, and then likely, we would want to do bike boxes here at Millage as well as part of all that. So, any other questions on this one? All right. So Westchester Drive. This is one of the T-SPOS projects. I think it made it in. We have from Mitchell Bridge Road up to Chalifont is being repaved. And basically all that traffic engineering told us was they would like to retain 22 feet of pavement for the travel lanes. So because of the wide curves and some of the speeds that people might go, they want to make sure that, and buses too, because this is transit routes. They wanted to make sure that we had 22 feet at least.
What's the overall
For
width of the road?
what's that?
What's the width of the road currently?
So in this particular area I just measured, this is 31 feet. So in some places we might be able to get bidirectional. In some places we won't. I think this was another situation. This is a really big hill right here. So we definitely want to do a bike lane going uphill. And then if we can do some downhill, we'll have to see what it looks like designed. One thing to note is, this is a local road and it's 25 miles an hour. But like, because it's a local road, it's not striped. So putting in bike lanes would put in striping here. Sometimes adding striping makes people speed more, but I think it just really depends on the users and the context. This isn't heavily trafficked by bikes currently, but it could be a cut through in the future, especially as people get more e-bikes and they're okay with going up those types of hills. And as we build the multi-use path connectivity on Tallahassee Road, as well as the Mitchell Bridge Road, this, you can see there's already a lot of people using their bikes here, but it might end up being a cut through to bypass that intersection.
I've never driven that road. How steep is it? And you have a general sense? I mean, is it, you're gonna work pretty hard going uphill, or is it a, looks,
I think you'd work pretty hard getting uphill.
it sure looks like it from there. Yeah, okay. But you'd be flying downhill.
Yeah.
And the downhill is away from Tallahassee toward, what am I thinking? It's the road that
Mitchell Bridge.
Mark is on. Mitchell Bridge, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the downhill. Yeah, that's steep. Okay.
So this is something that's not in the Athens in Motion plan. It wasn't even tiered. But it's an opportunity, if we have the pavement, we could do that.
So
I wanted to get y'all's take on it.
Yeah, right across from Westchester where it comes out Tallahassee, isn't that where a big neighborhood is going?
Yes.
Okay, so we imagine people potentially cutting through there eventually to go down Mitchell Bridge eventually, which is like a 55-mile-per-hour road.
And, it's one of those things where if the Greenway section gets built out here, once we get multi-use path on Mitchell Bridge, that in itself is going to draw more bike traffic. And so this is just a way that we can.
Planned for Mitchell Bridge. There is one planned for Mitchell Bridge.
What's that?
A multi-use path is planned for Mitchell Bridge.
Yeah, so that's part of the Atlanta Highway Corridor funding. We are doing concept development for both Timothy and Mitchell Bridge.
Gotcha.
So that will include basically concepts, and then from there the funding stops, and we are then, part of that funding is allocated to Atlanta Highway itself, and I think there's another like 1.1 or 1.5 million that is undetermined, and it could be applied towards these in the future. But as Timothy and Mitchell Bridge also are T-SPLOST 23, there's I think 7 million to build and implement these plans. So the plans include like a pedestrian bridge over the loop here. There's a wide variety of stuff included there. So because we're doing those concept plans, we want to make sure we're not just doing a concept plan and then putting it on the shelf. We actually want to, that's like one of our strategies for the grant funding is which projects are going to be ready to go to get construction money. So Cherokee Road is an example of that.
Ready.
So for Westchester Drive, then we're thinking bike lane one way uphill. Is that what you're saying, Daniel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I will do correction.
Yeah, just for I was just checking here from Mitchell Bridge to Chalfont is about 110 feet in elevation increase in 0.2 of a mile. So
That's a
short, but a pretty good climb. Yeah.
Wait, 10% grade, right?
Yeah.
100 feet over 1,000.
Yeah. So, it might not be a popular bike route, but there also might be some people in that neighborhood who are who require riding a bicycle. So
yeah.
So you are on board with that one?
Yeah, so my one thought, and I'm not sure how to address this, is, the neighborhood took the time to submit their T-SPLOST project. It's passed mayor and commission muster, and it's just got to pass the referendum in the spring. I'm wondering how we can make sure that when people who live in this neighborhood like see this pavement and see this bike lane come in, that they also know that the sidewalk that they've requested, provided that voters approve T-SPLOST, is also coming, so they don't get really upset and think like, wow, we asked for sidewalks and they just gave us a bike lane. That's not what we asked for at all. So I don't know if there's some way we can communicate that or let them know like that it's coming if T-SPLOST passes. I just don't want them to get the wrong idea, because there's we're
Yeah.
working on remedying mistrust.
Well, and I think those are really great points that it reminded me of a conversation that we had recently, but part of the whole thing is that mistrust is in, government stuff being so like hard to understand, or it doesn't feel like we're being transparent. So I think what would be a good idea on all of these projects, when we do restripe a road, especially if it's in a residential area, we go and do a door-to-door, like whether mailing or, public session, do some outreach, let them know, hey, by the way, we're repaving this road, we're adding in some bike facilities. It won't impact it won't directly impact your travel, but this is not the same as, just to basically let it know this is through the repaving funds, not the Westchester.
I have a
I like
question.
that idea.
I have a question in terms of strategy. Let's assume that the referendum passes in May. Could we sort of look at the repaving and the design at the same time? Is that something that can be done, or is that just mixing apples and potatoes?
The design for the sidewalks are so far down the road. I mean, that's like years down the road. When we do the sidewalk design, I do want to make sure that all these areas where we're adding sidewalks, I want to make sure they're areas where we're not going to need to add in additional width or bike lanes or anything like that. So that is something kind of separate, where it's like, if this needs, bike lanes on it and we need to widen the road, then the sidewalk, when we build that, we're going to make that a much larger buffer than if we just, like, we're not just going to do 3-foot buffer, because then we'd have to rip out the sidewalks to widen. But yeah, as far as like paving next to the T-SPLOST, I don't think that, this is really like, it's literally a spreadsheet, I think, that we hand off to a contractor, and they're out there pouring tar, like, and they're doing from segment 1 to segment 2, this segment to that segment, they're doing whatever stuff they need to do. It's definitely a complicated process, but we're not over every single little bit. And then from there, there's always striping that comes in, but that has to wait a certain amount of time. It can't be right afterwards. I think it's usually 30-day wait time. And that happened, that was an issue with Hancock, when we report it and then we marked it with like temporary striping, but it wasn't clear what was going on, and people were like, whoa, wait a second, this isn't what was here before. Like, what are you doing? But yeah, I think with this road, it would just be, repave. This type of stuff is simple because it's not currently striped. So we would repave it, and then when we come back to restripe it later, that's when we would do that. But all of it is just through a contractor, and they're working with the engineering division. I can't have my hands in every single project, or I might start getting that slapped.
Hey, Daniel, I mean, I just wanted to add, I understand the rationale behind the uphill bike lane, and I get that, but I can't help but think that very few people are going to ride this uphill, and a ton of people will be screaming downhill and saying, well, they have a nice bike lane going uphill, but it's the question of, do you build the facility for where the greatest use is, or do you build it around, other factors, including potentially safety of the smaller number that are going uphill? And I'm not saying no, I'm just, particularly when it's such a steep gradient, I just wonder how many people realistically would do it, you know.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I want to talk to you guys, because I mean, I can take these notes and we're gonna give them to, like, this is also gonna be handed off to a consultant to draft up. I mean, that's a good point. If everyone who is riding their bike is walking up the sidewalk with their bike, or the lack of sidewalk right now, then like maybe we do need to just have it come downhill. But
No, I think, yeah, bike lanes uphill are just, you really, it's much safer. You feel so much safer in a bike lane going uphill, even if it's going slow. Well, because you're going slow and traffic's flying by.
Yeah.
And I think, just because there's a hill, we shouldn't assume that people don't ride up it. I mean,
Okay.
there's
No.
lots of people that
I just
ride
wanted to raise
hills.
the point. I'm fully behind this plan.
No,
I'm
okay.
just thinking more of a
Yeah.
general way. I mean, but anyway, no, that's fine.
All right, let's add Westchester to our future bike trip. Daniel and Scott. Let's see who makes it up the hill. I'll
Not
make it.
me.
I will have to go on the lowest gear. Maybe I'll see if I can borrow the e-bike from Leisure Services. I'll cruise right past y'all. One that I had mentioned before, I'm just going to touch on it briefly, but we removed it from consideration, was Whitehead. Whitehead Road is getting repaved. It is in the Athens in Motion plan as Project 35. It's a proposed buffered facility, and it's tier 3 bike and pedestrian. So it's, down on the list. There's not room within this area. There's enough right of way. If we were to do a future expansion, I don't know that we would need to do right of way acquisition, because from what I gathered, it was an 80-foot right of way. Excuse me. But the edge of pavement goes between 27 and 29 feet, and it has 12-foot travel lanes. Even if we were to narrow those travel lanes down, it wouldn't be enough for a bike lane. The only thing that we could really do at this point, because it does need to be repaved, is do sharrows. And we had a lengthy discussion in email, and we don't think that would be a good idea. Most likely in the future, what we're probably going to do here, because there's a multi-use path plan for Tallahassee Road and there's a multi-use path plan for Jefferson River Road, we'll likely have a multi-use path along Whitehead once it turns from a tier 3 up to a tier 1. That will be one of the things that will help that along, is the existing infrastructure that would be added in. So once Tallahassee gets built, once Jefferson River Road gets built, now that is a gap, and that bumps up higher in prioritization. So we're just going to restripe this like normal and not do sharrows. Cool. So on to the safety related projects, and I'm going to zip a little bit through. I was pretty proud of this one. I got each division admin on the call, and this is something that we're going to work towards. So we're going to in-house extend this curb out. That'll be through streets and drainage, and we're going to try to pair this with the repaving. So we're going to reduce the width of this crossing, as you've mentioned, Mark. One thing that we want to make sure, it looks like this apron was added in with concrete because this was a sharp turn. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of even out between the two. So this will kind of come in perpendicular, and we're going to build out the curb on this side, and we're going to build out the curb on this side. and then come back and repave shortly after that. So this
Gotcha.
this is one of those combination things where streets and drainage is gonna do the concrete work, and then right afterwards, engineering division is gonna come in with the contractor to do the repaving. I think from our discussion, it sounds like we have it in the budget to do this work in-house, and
And it is a stop sign now, so it also makes a lot more sense as a three-way stop to have it that
Yeah.
way when people aren't, So anyway, great work. Thank you.
yeah, I was pretty happy with the way that conversation went. We're probably gonna also, this is another one, this is one where we also thought it would be a good idea to, me and maybe traffic engineering or you guys, we can all go door to door, talk with people, maybe Bike Athens can get on it, basically let them know what's coming, and do that in each of these locations where we're proposing changes, so that people know what's coming, and that gives them a chance to feel like they're being heard.
I'll certainly be happy to do that along Barrow for sure and elsewhere.
Awesome. So then I'm gonna jump over to Old Epps Bridge Road. This is one of the highest, if not the highest, crash count, near crash count, Alps Road and West Broad Street. That's the highest. That's like one of our most, one of our highest crash count, like in Athens.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people use Old Epps Bridge to bypass that spot. We looked at it. Old Epps Bridge is a local road. It's 25 miles an hour. There aren't any speed limit signs on here right now. And a lot of people fly through there. And then over here, when they pull out, there's a fair number of crashes where people are pulling out and maybe they are pulling to go left on West Broad. There's various reasons why that might be. Ultimately, what we're going to do is our traffic engineering division is going to do a count on this road. That'll also be a speed study, so we'll be able to capture the speed data as well as number of people using this, the volume. We are wanting to put in some speed tables here, and then potentially try doing a right only out, so right in, right out, which will cut down on the collisions from people turning left. We're going to do this in conjunction with GDOT's RSA, road safety audit. But I just kind of wanted to let you guys know from a safety point of view, that's kind of what we're looking at. And number one thing is to see if, if this is like justified, or, this will also give us an idea of how many people are coming off of Gardenia to do this versus how many people are cut through.
It's a lot of cut through.
Yeah, I've done it myself.
Cut through on a regular basis, I'm sorry to say.
And it's one of those things where if that's a convenient thing, that's what people are going to do. So now when I'm cutting through, I'm not going 80 miles an hour, but.
So I'm trying to understand, like, the reason why people would try and make a left-hand turn off of Old Epps Bridge is because you can't make a left-hand turn at Hawthorne, right? And you can't, and maybe if you live back like off of Gardenia, and maybe you don't want to be at the light at, what is that, Camille Drive.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand, like, what's driving that left-hand turn from there.
And it's not
Hilltop Grill. People
like
live in
visiting
Hilltop Grill and wanted to go back toward town. Right.
Or I've done a visit after visiting one of these businesses or something along here, and I need to go back to where I used to live in Baxter. I would take a left here.
Yeah.
Because because you can't go left off Hawthorne. So like you said, so yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also it could be that you're just trying to kind of weave your way back into Beechwood if you're going there. Like it might be that this is the quicker way rather than waiting through the traffic light here. Or it could be that you need to, that you're actually visiting a business and wanting to turn left. So yeah, checking into that, and whatever we do here, that's where we're wanting to move towards doing more of what we're calling, intermediary design. So it's where you use more temporary infrastructure to see what results that has. We're doing that hopefully with one of our upcoming corridor projects, and we're trying to do that more so that rather than putting thermoplastic down and then if it doesn't work out we have to grind it up or repave and get it resurfaced and stuff, we can do some temporary striping or marking or raised curbs, those kind of things. Orca strips are pretty common for that, so that could be
Daniel?
something we do here.
Daniel,
Mhm.
where are the crashes happening for the most part?
Great question.
Oh yeah, right at that angle. Yeah.
I think one of the more common crashes, it's not so much the people coming out, but it's the people who are, there was a lot in this area, there were a lot of rear end crashes.
Huh.
And so I'm gonna just show you a scenario that I have seen. I haven't seen the crash, but I've seen where it could definitely happen. Let's say traffic is backed up on West Broad. You've got someone here turning left into Old Epps Bridge. You've got people who are coming up to try to bypass waiting in line, and they're just going straight up all the way through the center turn lane.
Mhm.
This had a really high number of rear end crashes.
Yeah, that makes sense because there's also a hotel just before you get to Hawthorne. And sometimes people will get in there to make the left turn into the hotel, but people who just are going straight to the red arrow to turn left don't realize that the car in front of them is going to stop.
Right.
So that's
And
one
then
thing.
it could also be like if someone's pulling out and you're driving this way, so we'll zip over there and get that point of view. So if there's a car pulling out in front of you, we'll let the image load, and you hit your brakes, you might get hit from behind. So there were not a lot of like T-bone crashes or angle crashes here. They were mostly rear end. And I can.
Well, the other thing is there are lots of people who just cross West Broad, Atlanta Highway at that area. Just
Mhm.
anywhere in the road, they'll just cross because it's too darn inconvenient to go to a proper crosswalk because there are so few of them.
Yeah. So at this location, just gonna grab those up there as well. So you can see total crashes since 2013, 134. 116 of those are intersection related. Mostly no injury.
Yeah, I bet you're right. It's people trying to sneak past to get into that left turn lane. Now,
Yeah,
there are engineering things that can be done to make that safer to prevent that kind of behavior.
and we're hoping, and I think GDOT with their corridor, with their road safety audit here, by working with them on what we're doing here and figuring out what their plans are, we can do some work here, see what their recommendations are, and we can get it started with the repaving.
Right.
This also might just be one of those things where we just go ahead and repave it and then restripe it the same exact way. But I wanted to go ahead while this was being repaved and we were talking about it, like let's go ahead and see what we can do. Yeah, and so you can see 57% of crashes are rear end here. So
How
yeah.
many pedestrian crashes are there in this area? Do you have a fix on that?
There are 5 within this box. So and with those 4 serious injury, 1 minor visible injury. They were all crossing here at this location
Mhm.
because there's not a crosswalk.
No,
There's
there's
not an
not.
intersection.
So is that something that could be added into a repaving, or is that going to be beyond the scope?
No, I mean that crosswalk would go across West Broad Street. That is GDOT. We're not doing that. We're just repaving this one road up here that's a local road.
All
That
right.
being
we're open for
said,
it.
I think we could talk with GDOT about maybe a PHB here.
Yeah, lots of people cross there, there's just,
And so, yeah, and with the pedestrian hybrid beacons, it's nice because it's like you push the button, and then once it works with the flow of the traffic lights, it then activates the traffic light, and so you're able to. So it's good if you don't need like a signal for vehicles.
mhm.
I've seen some cool uses of that recently.
So then what you're saying is that like when the light up the road would change, it would automatically know that people could try and cross here?
So a pedestrian hybrid beacon is something we don't currently have in Athens-Clarke County. This is like a representation of what that could look like. It's
Ah,
essentially always green, and then when the button's been pushed, it actually is a traffic light. It's traffic control device, goes red. Sometimes that can have a bike symbol or a pedestrian symbol for that green or red, for the red, to show you, hey, you're stopping for a pedestrian here. This is, when we can't do a mid-block crossing across the road because it is too high volume, this is one of the newer, they used to be called Hawks, but this can be used
right.
to help with that. We don't currently have one. In discussions with GDOT, they have a safety program where you can apply for different safety equipment. So we're trying to work more with them to get some of these types of things. And as I mentioned earlier, when reading out that Athens in Motion project description, it included signals such as this. So we could actually use the Athens in Motion funding to install these.
Yeah, I'm curious about their use for, I mean, seven lanes. We're talking at least 7 lanes here, right?
Mhm.
That's a lot.
It does seem like a lot, and these cars are moving very fast, and they're not used to seeing it. I don't know.
Are we going to be able to put it on a road diet with our Atlanta Highway corridor work?
They might be able to in some places. I believe the volume, there's a huge drop in volume once you go east of Alps.
Mm-hmm.
So this east of Alps might be a consideration for a road diet. West, I don't think we're going to be able to get a road diet there, but that's where it's like you want to build the facilities outside of it. Yeah, there are there's some ranges of volumes for PHBs. I don't know if this site is suitable or not. They need to be above a certain threshold of vehicular traffic, but they also, I believe, need to fall below a certain threshold. Once again, that's where I'm trying to work more with the state safety engineer to really fully understand because recommendations change from day to day, not day to day, but year to year. It's somewhat stable, but if you heard what a recommendation was 5 years ago, that might not be the case anymore. So just trying to stay up to date on all that.
Thank you, Daniel.
That's this location. Let's skip those. So bike boulevards, I wanted to talk about this briefly just because we did talk about Sharrows a bit over email. So ultimately, bike boulevard programs are really helpful to on streets that would never get bike lanes. It can still be a really you can use Sharrows to be really effective routing mechanisms to kind of keep you on that route, or to show you that maybe if you're in a car and you're going through a neighborhood and you see that Sharrow on the road, you're like, oh, that's cool to know that like this is part of that like bike network where it is actually safe and it's not just a Sharrow on Hawthorne, you know. So it's part of what I was talking about with that. Like when I say Sharrow master plan, that's basically a bike boulevard master plan. And we want to make sure that like there are not as many regulations as I would have thought for how municipalities use Sharrows. Obviously, F8. I think I was actually reading on Bike Athens webpage. They had a pretty good summary of the difference between what FHWA says and what um, NACTO design guidelines say. And as a little plug there, I've been getting notifications that NACTO is currently updating their bicycle guides. So come, I think maybe in the summer of 22, we're going to have like a brand new set of guidelines from NACTO. And that may provide even more context or, as I mentioned, recommendations change on a yearly basis sometimes. So that'll be really cool to see what NACTO's come up with. The areas where we're talking that could be good for bike boulevard, one of the considerations is local street, less than 25 miles an hour. And an example would be, you can see there's kind of a heavy traffic that comes through. It goes like on, here's like McWhorter and Stanton Way. And so Carlton Terrace is a pretty heavily used area. This is getting repaved as part of another project. So, this, if we look at like University Drive, for instance, this University Drive is pretty heavily trafficked with bikes. We don't need to put them on every single neighborhood road, but if we can start using either like, not necessarily Strava Metro, but a database that uses a more kind of robust data set that can give us a better cross-section of where bikes are actively traveling, to me, that's a pretty good indicator of where do people enjoy bicycling. Like, it's one thing to look at a map, but like hills, like especially with Athens, like you can see there's like some like up King, you then turn on Hillcrest and then you go on Hill Street. Like that's a pretty common route versus going up King and then right like you would with a vehicle. So by using this type of data, we could then potentially map out some bike boulevards throughout. It kind of also leads into another conversation about bike routes. So this is kind of a larger thing. My 1 minute thing on it is GDOT, safety engineering, and bike and pedestrian engineer for the state. So this is Sam Harris and Ron. I don't remember his last name off the top of my head, but Ron or Ronald, he's the new bike and pedestrian engineer for the state. They are working on mapping out GDOT's bike routes at the state level, and they want to have an interactive map of all of those bike routes. And he kind of mentioned some ideas. This isn't necessarily promising that this is what they're going to do, but yeah, we were kind of brainstorming, and if you zoom in on a community, then you can actually, then their bike routes pop up. This kind of made me think about like, we have our bike network mapped, but we don't, and it's not, I'm still working to improve it. But we don't have bike routes in Athens. So if you think of like a bike route from point A to point B could go, if you're trying to get to, Oconee Forest from, Indian Hills Road, you're not going to like take the same route you would take from a car, right? You're not going to go down Barnett Shoals and research. You're going to go probably on the Firefly Trail and then maybe pop off at Winterville Road and then take the Greenway down to College Station. And so you could actually use the Greenway as a part of a bike route or some of these roads as part of bike routes. And so I'm trying to get more information about just like what are other localities doing with bike routes, and is that something that's popular? You could have like a bike route map where it's like you know, and I think the Netherlands does this a lot. So
Germany
um,
too. Yeah,
yeah,
Germany, you have these signs that have, they're pointing in all these different directions, 4 kilometers to this, 2 kilometers to this, and so on.
yeah, and you know, and that kind of gets into that wayfinding um,
Mhm.
situation. So
Yeah.
it's something that, you know, we haven't really looked at or talked about, or I haven't been involved in those discussions. Um,
Yeah.
but I wanted to bring it up to y'all. Um, there's some other ideas that I want to bounce off of like leisure services. Um, as far as like this round of bike boulevards goes, Carlton Terrace, Normal Avenue, and Scott Street.
Mm.
So that one's for you, Scott.
So
Um,
when I've read about bike boulevards, there's usually also an effort to calm traffic or to create, visual reminders that this is a shared space with bicycles. And really my understanding is bike boulevards are intended to be, bikes are equal to cars in this space and have the same rights as cars in this space.
mhm,
My understanding in some places is that bikes have the main right, like in Portland on their
Mhm.
boulevards. I
Yeah,
think bikes are first priority.
right.
And apparently, as a driver, or if you're in your car, what you're getting into when you're on those bike routes.
yeah,
There's still
and
bikes. I mean, there's still
other than
cars.
a Sharrow, it does say it's a bike with a boulevard. So I guess I misspoke earlier when I said using Sharrows here. You know, the Sharrows I guess would be more used for like getting like routing to and from a lane or to and from a bike boulevard, something like that. So um,
So I know that we're mainly talking about pavement right now, and it's 5:30. So we probably
yeah,
need to go. But I mean, can we use funds for just more signage? Tybee Island, like they've got the Sharrows, but it's mainly a lot of signs is how they're directing people. Just like signs on a stick. They're
yeah.
not even like state highway signs or anything like that. They're not even reflective, I don't think.
Well, I know
Um,
with wayfinding, one of the big concerns just across the board, whether, and I just learned this from when I was in leisure services, but um, you know, rather than saying like, hey, for this park we want signs in these places, like the number one thing we need to do is create a master plan, right? And then we can develop that. So with bike scale or pedestrian scale wayfinding, we need to develop a master plan of, you know, where are we doing this? What are the rules? What are some ideas for the design? And you start big picture and then you work down to the details. But that would be a really helpful exercise, I think, even from you guys, if that was something. I know we've talked about it a couple times. It's been mentioned to me outside of Athens in Motion, but just from transportation standpoint, we are interested in seeing some ideas for that pedestrian and bike scale wayfinding. But the one of the main considerations with traffic engineering in that discussion is with those signs, if they are in the right of way, you know, making sure that it doesn't confuse drivers, right? So like if drivers are like, oh wait, am I supposed to read that? And they like are trying to get over to read it, and then they end up being more unsafe than, you know, if you if you just didn't have the signs. So um, that being said, I think there's a lot of cool things we could do. I'd be interested in seeing what y'all thought. Yeah, the only other things in this were I think Bailey Street is getting repaved, which that's right here. The Greenway actually starts on like there's a trailhead here. So I'm gonna talk to Leisure Services to see if they're interested. Right now, the way that Greenway is marked is like we have these little columns. Um, and this one I believe has lettering now, but like this, once you're at the Greenway, if you know where you're going, then you don't really need the sign. But you know, we have the bollards back here. It looks like someone's driveway because it is. And so I'm going to talk with Leisure Services to see if they'd be interested in trying out some sharrows like on this road with an actual Greenway logo kind of incorporated into it.
Hey, Daniel, that reminds me as you go down that stretch of Greenway on the left side are a bunch of apartments and there's no real formal connection to those apartments. So, I don't know the best way they access the Greenway, but it seems like if we build a Greenway and it's right next to a bunch of apartments, that might be a good thing to create a, safe connection.
My take on that probably is that the apartments put the fence up, and that's, they shouldn't have done that because I think a lot of their users want to get in there. It's like some condos and stuff, but they're like, no, boundary.
I've talked to multiple people from this group or from this complex. This used to be a service road back here, and people would complain about people coming through the fence because the fence along here, if I remember correctly, is a chain link. It's
Yeah.
not like a decorative one.
Right.
And so they said that people would go up and down that service road and they'd throw rocks and bust people's windows out of their cars. And I think it's one of those things where, like, yeah, it probably did happen a few times. But it is a gated community, and
It looks like they can access it via carriage lane pretty easily, so maybe.
yeah, they have
Yeah.
a pedestrian gate here, but it
Over
is,
there.
it gets complicated because then it's like we were involved in figuring out, like, okay, well, how do we want to, regulate how people connect to the Greenway? Like, we need some sort of standard so that people, like, they can't just build a sidewalk right up to it, um, there needs to be some standards here. And so we had some discussions about it. I don't know whatever happened with it, but it's interesting. I mean, that's their pedestrian access. They don't even have a sidewalk.
I ran this section and into this neighborhood too when the traffic gates were open. And yeah, it's very much, that gated community mindset where we're going to be separate from everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think David Spooner, when he was on the Greenway Commission, he's a design professor. He came up with some design standards for how units could connect to the Greenway. And he works in landscape design, and so he had his students come up with a bunch of drawings and examples, and it was all very nicely laid out. So you may want to check, maybe even contact David about that. But they have done that work, I know. How whether it was formally integrated into the Greenway master plan or not, I'm not sure.
I can tell you it wasn't, but I'll definitely talk to him and find out, because
Spooner D at uga.edu, if I remember right.
yeah, he was also on the Dudley user group, and I've worked with him. I was in that college environment design, so
Cool. Okay. All right.
yeah,
Good guy.
we've touched base a few times. So you might have some design considerations for connecting to developments.
Okay, so you're talking about having some paint on Bailey Street that indicates that we are approaching a trailhead. Are there any plans to have some maps or miniature versions of the maps of these trailheads? Because I was out biking one day and I met a woman who was trying to figure out where to go to get on this trail, and she was from out of town. And so I said, just come with us. And she didn't know who we were. But yeah, she parked her car in that cul-de-sac and she rode with us. And I think maybe a map could be helpful.
I put an example of there's a Dutch biking blog. It's in English and it shows some examples of some of the signage and how they're doing it. And, there's some pretty cool little route maps.
Yeah, we have some. I'm trying to find where. See, I did all the map design. I think what we ended up with in this area, we have kind of a master plan for where those signs go and what use they have. So we ultimately said, like, a trail map here, which trail maps are the 24 by 24 squares. You'll see them on like a metal frame. We build those metal frames in-house, get them powder coated. It's a cheap way to do like a pretty simple informational sign. So at each trailhead, you would have a trail map, and then at each intersection, you would have trail wayfinding, which that includes a different type of map where it actually just shows you the context of the area around it and the direction you're facing. So, and then it also has like written out, you know, UGA straight ahead, UGA park and ride ahead, you know, and it starts giving you waypoints, not to local businesses because that would get pretty complicated pretty quickly, but
Mhm.
to those things. When I left off, I had designed some of that wayfinding signage. I think Todd may have updated you guys on it at one point. He's working on it again, but that could be something we ask Todd to maybe take a little bit more time to talk about what he, what they're doing. I know I'm trying to. One of these locations I think has a wayfinding map, but I think it might be one of these spots where this is just out of date. But we have those. We also call them the monolith kiosks. It looks like the
Yeah.
2021 monolith. But
Yeah.
I think
Um,
there's one along.
Thanks, Daniel. So we're over time.
Yeah, those guys.
Anything else that we want to look at right now? Yes, there it is. They look so good. They look really awesome.
So yeah, so that's all of the things. I don't know if you guys want to support that recommendation with the motion. Basically, it would include the Baxter Street and Westchester Drive going to a consultant for restriping plans, and then just you support the. You don't even really need to do a motion on the safety stuff. That's kind of separate from you guys' purview. So.
Okay, so the
Maybe
main
on
thing that you
Pike
need a
Boulevard.
motion on is Baxter Street in particular.
Baxter and Westchester.
Okay. So combined into one motion is helpful.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think just consideration of Baxter Street. So I can throw out the wording if you want, like, or do you guys have to do that?
Um, I, I think I can do it real quick. I'll make a motion for you to pursue design for Baxter Street based on the conversation we had today. The idea mainly being to get a bike lane on one side of the road between Rock Springs and Millage, and then Westchester Drive, also probably a bike lane on one side of the road going uphill, and any other safety features as necessary that we could implement during repaving, restriping activities.
And then yeah, I guess let's go and do that one.
So there, I have a motion on the floor from the
I'll second
chair.
that.
Can I get a
I'll second
second?
that.
I'll
Yeah.
second it.
Okay, Teresa, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed, same sign. All right.
Now if you wanted to do a secondary, you could do something related to bike boulevards. Generally, our paving schedule is not going to the number one thing that we do with bike boulevard, if we see something that would be a good bike boulevard in the future, as part of the repaving schedule, we've just been asking them to not do any striping because ultimately we can come back later with bike boulevard program where we go in and we do the striping in those areas. So I'm kind of just like I inherited it from Hillary where she recommended these particular streets in that year of like 2020 or 2019. And then last year I recommended some more, and then this year we're adding in some more. So over time we'll have kind of a list. But I don't know if y'all want to do anything related to Bike Boulevard. It doesn't affect the paving schedule other than we're
Yeah,
not
let's
going to do striping there.
maybe let's come back to that. So I don't think we can get into anything very specific there, and I'm fine with. I think we're fine with the direction you're heading. But if you need more strength behind the direction you want to go, then we can come back and do a motion another time.
Yeah, I think it could be a cool thing when the projects committee is looking for extra work, you know.
Good.
Yeah.
When y'all don't have enough to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. We have a meeting next week again. Yay. Okay, we're really over time.
Yeah, I gotta go. I'm sorry. I got
Yeah,
2
Daniel, don't you have bowling?
No, not tonight.
Oh.
I did pre-bowling this week.
Oh, right. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, thank you for staying late. Love nerding out with y'all about pavement, asphalt, concrete, thermopaint, all that good stuff. And I hope everyone stays safe out there, and see y'all soon.
All right. Cheers.
See you later.
Everybody.
Bye.